So the one story of God is that he is bringing about a person who is going to restore the earth. And that he is going to do that through the family line of Abraham. And so as we read the book of Genesis, we have been tracing it through Adam and Eve, through Seth, through Noah, through Abraham, and through his son Isaac. And as we look at the stories of Jacob and his 12 sons, we are going to see how God is once again proving himself to be faithful, proving himself to be the only one that can bring about the descendant that's going to restore the earth, that's going to bless all of the nations of the earth. And so after Abraham, then comes Isaac. And then Isaac has a son named Jacob. And from the very beginning, with the conflict between Jacob and Esau, we know that Jacob's life is going to be one that's marked with struggle. That he is going to struggle not just with his brother, not just with his father, but ultimately with God. That the example that we read about from Abraham of walking faithfully with God, of trusting and obeying God, that's going to be difficult for Jacob. And we read in the life of Isaac, his father, that Isaac had to go through similar circumstances to strengthen Isaac's faith. And Jacob is going to be the same. His faith is going to have to be challenged. So as you read the stories of Jacob, you're going to see the same picture emerge. That his plans are going to crumble, but God's plans are going to happen. And just like Abraham, who's going to be called a patriarch of the faith, Jacob is going to also become a patriarch because he has 12 sons. And if you know anything about the rest of the Old Testament, you know that the nation of Israel is going to be divided into 12 tribes. And the 12 tribes all start with these 12 sons. And so it is from Jacob and his 12 sons that the nation of Israel is going to be born. And even though Jacob loves and cherishes his wife Rachel and elevates her 2 sons above the other sons, we are going to see that God is not going to choose Joseph or Benjamin, but he's actually going to choose one of the sons of Jacob's wife Leah. And so the last several chapters of the book of Genesis is going to focus in primarily on the life of Joseph. But remember, the line of promise, God's one story of restoration, is not actually going to happen through the family line of Joseph. It actually happens through the family line of Judah. So why did the ending chapters of the book of Genesis focus so much on Joseph? It's because Joseph is going to paint us this picture that's going to help us anticipate what God is going to do in the future through the life of David, through the life of Solomon, but ultimately through the life of Jesus. And that's because he is one who is described as wise. Whereas before Joseph, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, they all struggled with that distinction between good and evil. That even though they had faith in God, they still at times failed to trust and obey God. But Joseph is this picture of one who trusts and obeys God completely. He's even described as having the Spirit of God in him. When we get to the very end of the life of Joseph, we see that he was able to have a godly perspective on his life. That although he was going to go through times of great difficulty and suffering, that God was working throughout all of it to bring goodness and his blessing to Joseph and to the world at that time. And so the story of Joseph anticipates and leads us to Jesus as one who is also going to be wise, who's going to know the difference between good and evil, who God is going to work in the middle of the suffering and the trials of Jesus' life to bring about goodness and blessing and restoration to the whole world. But remember, the family line that God is bringing doesn't actually go through Joseph. It goes through Judah. And so as you read the stories of Joseph, pay attention to how Judah is described, because Judah is also in the story. And although he isn't always pictured in the best of light, he is nonetheless the one that's going to carry on God's family line. That once again, God is proving that he is going to remain faithful to his chosen people. that he alone can bring about the family line, that he is going to work in the middle of their lives for his glory. So that way there is no doubt that God was the one who made this happen. So when we look closely through the ending chapters of the book of Genesis, we see that Judah is pictured as one who is going to speak up and try to save his brothers. That he's going to try to save Joseph from his brothers killing him. That Judah is going to try to save Benjamin and actually offer himself in place of Benjamin. And then he is actually going to be the one that leads his family into the fruitfulness of the land east of Egypt. And it's going to be from the line of Judah that David is going to come, but that ultimately Jesus is going to come, who is going to offer himself in place of us. So that way we can enjoy God himself. That we get to experience what it means to be in this relationship with God and to walk faithfully before him. So as we finish the book of Genesis, I hope that you can see how God has been working from the first chapter to the last chapter, how God is bringing about his plan to restore the earth, and how all of this is leading up to Jesus, so that way by the time we get to the story of Jesus, we can trust and obey God, that we will be ready to walk faithfully with God in a relationship that comes only through Jesus.